and welcome back to Bengal Bites, real, raw, unfiltered talk about the Cincinnati Bengals and the NFL. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 8. This is the Week 2 preview episode for the Baltimore Ravens at Cincinnati Bengals. If you're brand new to this podcast, go back and check out episode 0, where I explain the who, what, why, all the questions, but I basically laid out that I'm a lifelong NFL fan, lifelong Bengals fan. I played all the way through college, and I've got this love of the game that I want to share with you, the fan. So if you're ready to experience the 2023 NFL season from a Bengals fan perspective, this podcast is for you. In our last episode, episode 7, we did a complete breakdown of the Week 1 disaster that was the game against the Cleveland Browns. We were all pumped up and excited, and it really could not have gone any worse. But just like the team, we're going to turn the page on that. This is a new week, fresh start, Week 2 against the Baltimore Ravens. Football season kicks off at Paycor Stadium. First home game of the season. All the fans are going to be excited. I'm sure it's going to be a sellout crowd. Everybody's going to be excited to see the team. As we know, this team gets off to slow starts under Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow traditionally. So nothing to worry about. No big deal. We go 0-2 and still go to the Super Bowl like we did. Don't panic. All good. In this episode, we're going to run through some of the news items of the week, including a lot of the injuries that the Ravens are dealing with right now. We're also going to touch on the episode 2 of From the Jungle, the Bengals in-house production series where they follow the team and do some behind the scenes. And we're going to break down this matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, talk a little bit about some of the recent history between the two teams, what are the scouting report on the Baltimore Ravens of 2023, because they did have some turnover from last year. Who are the players to watch, the big stars that we need to keep an eye on, some of the matchups throughout this game, how we think the different teams are going to match up against each other. And I'll run through my Week 2 NFL picks for all the games. But we're going to go full steam ahead with this podcast. There's nothing better to get the bad taste of last week out of our mouths than another great football game and another win at Paycor Stadium. So let's start off with some news. Let's talk about episode 2 of From the Jungle on YouTube. So I know episode 1 I was a little bit down on, didn't really have that much interesting. Part of the reason was it didn't really have that much Joe Burrow in the whole episode, so how exciting can it really be? But episode 2, they brought the fire, they brought the Joe Burrow. A big part of this episode was Joe Burrow behind the scenes contract extension. So they showed a little bit more of him kind of meeting with the Brown and Blackburns and signing the deal and just a little bit more. But I mean, any Joe Burrow, whatever we can get is awesome. We also got to see a Andre Iosivas interview, and he talked about his father and the importance of academics and getting a good education and how important it was for him since his father was from Romania. We also got to see some preseason Game 3 highlights, which we had already seen on YouTube. I mean, there is a few extra shots sprinkled in there. It was, some game action. They didn't really show too much actual football action in the last one. The last segment of the episode was leading into the game at Cleveland. They did a whole segment with Bengal Jim and Tony the Tiger, putting on all his face paint and doing all that stuff. It was good. I mean, it was a great, amazing quality episode. I give kudos to the Bengals production staff. They did an amazing job. They can't write the ending. The NFL is not scripted, actually. So the only problem was the last 60 seconds where the Bengals completely lost the game. That wasn't good. But the episode itself, really well done. So I'm going to put the link in the show descriptions. I recommend everybody go check that out. And it's not that long. It's only about 25 minutes long. So if you got 25 minutes or so, check it out. Now, the other big news everybody's talking about, Joe Burrow got a haircut. Yes, it's true. He decided the long flowing locks that he had from college back in the day wasn't really working for him. He said after a game like that, time to cut him off. So it's back to the traditional Joe Burrow He doesn't even know what to call it. It's the Joe Burrow. You know what it is. He's got the short size, a little bit of lettuce on top. He's looking like Joe Burrow of old. In the Wednesday press conferences, they didn't really say much. They said, on to Baltimore, 24-hour rule, get it out of your mind and run to the next one. Obviously, people still were asking him about Joe Burrow about why was he playing so bad. I don't know if Ben Baby was serious when he asked this question or not, but he asked Joe Burrow if he hurt his hand, like hurt his thumb or his finger on the opening play of the game, because he got hit and Zadarius Smith coming off the right side looked like it did hit Joe Burrow in the hand when he was throwing it. So people were thinking maybe like he had hurt his hand and that's why he wasn't throwing the ball very well. But no, he was completely fine. He said it was just wet, guys. Like, Joe Burrow's hand is fine. His calf, on the other hand, they asked him how he was feeling, and he kind of gave a so-so response. It still doesn't feel like he's 100%. The reporters asked Joe Burrow, I think because of the Aaron Rodgers Achilles injury, and people were calling for all grass fields because his Achilles was torn on a artificial surface at MetLife. They got brand new turf that's supposedly the latest and greatest artificial turf, but it still has the rubber pellets and plastic, so it's not natural grass, so people are still opposed to it. And they asked Joe Burrow what he thought about the issue, and Joe Burrow said, yeah, he kind of mimicked what the NFLPA president just came out and said. They're calling for all grass in every stadium, and they're saying, well, if the World Cup is demanding grass in every stadium, why can't you give that to your own players who play their home games at these stadiums? It doesn't make sense. We're paying Joe Burrow $275 million a year, but he's playing on AstroTurf? Like, what are we doing here? So he said that he thinks studies have shown that natural grass is safer than artificial turf, field turf, and his biggest issue was he wants every field to be uniform. All these teams playing all these different stadiums, every surface is kind of different. He was saying we should have pretty much the same uniform surface so the game is the same everywhere you play. It shouldn't be different surfaces, different consistencies of turf, different materials everywhere you go. That's just weird. That would be like if you played a basketball game on like different courts. It wouldn't make sense. Now, for the history going into this game, these two teams have been rivals for a long time. Like I said, the Ravens used to be the Browns before they moved from Cleveland to Baltimore. So this historically were the old Cleveland Browns. They just moved. There's still a lot of long history between the teams. The last two games of the Ravens season last year were against the Bengals, and they lost both of them. So they played the Bengals at the end of the regular season, and then their first wild card playoff game that they lost on the fumble in the jungle where Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt stripped it out of Tyler Huntley's hands when he was trying to dive over the goal line and came up 6 inches or a foot short of the goal line, got stripped out. Sam Hubbard picked it up, ran it all the way back, didn't get caught somehow, scored the touchdown. Everybody was going insane. From a Bengals perspective, that's like one of the most amazing, electrifying, awesome moments in Bengals history. From the Ravens perspective, not so much. They're probably a little bit bitter, and they had their opening game against the Texans. So, they were kind of thinking, all right, this is kind of the warm-up game. Obviously, it's the NFL. You have to prepare and get ready. You can't underestimate any team. But the Texans were pretty horrible last year, and they're not looking that much better this year. So if you're the Ravens, you're like, all right, we're really eyeballing week 2 to get our revenge on the Bengals. There's different players from last year, but the players who were there last year who remember what happened, they want to get their revenge on the Bengals at Paycor Stadium, where their season ended last year. For the Bengals, yeah, there is some interdivisional rivalry between these two teams, but really, for the Bengals at this point, last week was so bad, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. It can't get any worse than it was last week, honestly. There's nowhere to go but up. So whoever's coming in, they better be ready to play a seriously motivated Bengals team. It just so happens to be the Ravens. Sorry, Ravens. You're getting it taken out on you this week. For any Bengals fans who might be happening to go to the game, or if you're just watching the game, I'm sure they're going to show this. The Ruler of the Jungle is a tradition that the Bengals started, I think, last season or 2 seasons ago. So AJ Green, he just retired last season. So even he said it was a little bit quick. He didn't think they were going to ask him to come in and be the Ruler of the Jungle and basically a franchise ambassador so soon. But he was more than happy to do it. And that's great to see that the franchise is recognizing him as the true talent that he was for the team. There's no reason to wait. Everybody knows how good AJ Green was. There's no denying that. This day was coming. He just didn't think it was going to be so soon. But it's great. And all the fans are going to be there to support him. And AJ had an amazing career. He had some of his best games against the Ravens. I can think of number of games he won, long touchdowns at the end. So hopefully AJ Green will bring some good luck for the Bengals this week when he comes back. Now, the biggest storyline for the Ravens is the injuries. They've been dealing with a lot of injuries on their team this week. One injury they are going to get back is their Pro Bowl tight end, Mark Andrews. He should be coming back. He's Lamar Jackson's number one weapon when he's on the field. He is very reliable, very athletic for a tight end. He sat out week 1 with a strained quad, and the reasoning being it's a long season. Like, it's a 17-game season. No reason to rush his way back. And I kind of wish the Bengals were able to take that same strategy with Joe Burrow and say, hey, it's a long season. You got a strained muscle. Rest is the best thing for that type of an injury, not playing NFL football games. This is going to be Mark Andrews' first game back. We're going to see what he's able to do in terms of a connection with Lamar Jackson. Andrews has been enlisted as a limited participant on Wednesday and Thursday. So we'll have to see. If he does get out there, he's number 89 for the Ravens. So watch out for him. One player we definitely won't be seeing any of is J.K. Dobbins, their tailback. Unfortunately, he tore his Achilles tendon on a running play, and he is in the last year of his rookie contract, and he had been trying to hold out or trying to negotiate for a contract extension, but probably given his injury history and the position of running back that he plays, the Ravens decided not to extend J.K. Dobbins. It's going to be a rough situation. You would like to think that the team would do right by J.K. and extend him, but it's probably not very likely. In J.K. Dobbins' place, they're going to have Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. Gus Edwards, number 35, and Hill is number 43. Justice Hill is Dax Hill's brother. Dax, of course, is the Bengals' free safety, number 23. Dax is the younger brother of Justice Hill. So that will be interesting to see if he has to go and tackle his own brother. In terms of other injuries, the Ravens are dealing with their left tackle, Ronnie Stanley, and their center, Tyler Linderbaum. Both of those guys are questionable, but it's looking like they're probably both going to not play in the game. On the defensive side, the Ravens also have their free safety, Marcus Williams, is out with a pec injury, and Marlon Humphrey, their best corner, had a foot injury, so he's looking like he's going to be out. So they're going to be down a couple of defensive backs. They may not be quite as strong as the Browns were in terms of lockdown man-to-man coverage. So that may present some opportunities for Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd to get open if they're not playing so much man-to-man coverage. On the other hand, the Bengals were mostly healthy. Cam Sample is dealing with an injury to his ankle. He didn't practice on Wednesday and was limited Thursday. Then Chris Evans, the running back, he played through the game. It seemed like he was okay, but then he came up on the injury report Wednesday with a hamstring, and then he didn't practice on Thursday. So we're going to see Friday if Chris Evans is able to practice or he may be out. If Chris Evans is out, Chase Brown may end up getting his first action because he was not in uniform last week for week 1. He was in a healthy scratch. So we'll have to see if Chase Brown or Chris Evans is the go for running back. Otherwise, the Bengals are pretty healthy. Joe Burrow is still listed with a calf, but he's a full participant. So they're just going to have to manage Joe Burrow and hope that he doesn't have any kind of a setback and it's just slowly improving with rehab. Also, Logan Wilson and Marcus Bailey were listed on the injury report, but they should be ready to go this weekend. And also, we got some news that Joseph Osai, who had the ankle sprain in the preseason game 3 against the Commanders, he was able to practice on a limited basis Wednesday, Thursday. He may be able to go, so that would be good news if Cam Sample isn't able to go for some reason. So that covers all the players who may or may not play in the game. Now I want to do a Ravens scouting report to go over what we need to look at from a Bengals perspective. I want to start with talking about the Ravens offense against the Bengals defense, because the Bengals defense was the only thing worth talking about last week. So let's start with a little bit more of a positive spin this week. We're going to start on the Bengals defense. From the Bengals defensive perspective, the number one player to watch out for at all times is Lamar Jackson, their Ravens quarterback. MVP from a couple seasons ago, but still got a ton of talent around him. But everyone is going to be focused on Lamar. Now they've got a new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, who was previously at Georgia in the college ranks. It doesn't look to me like Lamar is running as much in terms of designed runs. They're not doing the read option play where he would either hand it off to the running back or run it himself. That play seems to be mostly taken out of the offense. And Lamar does run from time to time, but it's mostly to create space so he can pass. One of the biggest storylines was how the Ravens have given Lamar more control over the offense. Supposedly, the last few seasons, he would just get the play in from the offensive coordinator, and they would run up to the line with no audibles, no checks, and even if the play wasn't going to work, they would just run it anyway, which seems ridiculous for professional football players to not have any kind of audibles or checks available to them. Sounds kind of made up to me, but apparently Lamar has all this freedom now, and now he's going to be like Peyton Manning out there calling all the plays. That remains to be seen. We'll see what Lamar is actually doing, but I think they said that in the previous years he was wearing the wristband and reading the plays off the wristband, and now supposedly he does not have the wristband. So who knows if that's going to make any difference, but they look pretty good against the Texans last week. The only thing I noticed about Lamar was he was very free and loosey-goosey with the football, holding it while he was scrambling around in one hand, and a couple times he fumbled it, where it got knocked out of his hand. He lost one, he got one back. So that's one thing. If Jermaine Pratt or the other linebackers are around Lamar, he may be prone to fumbles. So the Bengals have to make sure they strip it whenever they get around Lamar. The other thing that was obvious from the Texans game was that the offensive line gave up some pressure on the blitz, and when they did, he did not handle the blitz at all. A lot of times he would throw it away or get sacked and not get the ball away quickly enough. So if the Bengals are able to get pressure with or without a blitz, Lamar under pressure is much less effective than when he was able to just stand back there and throw. In the past several years, it seems like the Bengals have done a pretty good job of containing Lamar. I know there was that one spectacular play where he did the spin move inside Carlos Dunlap and went past Nick Vigil and all those other guys and made the Bengals look ridiculous. But other than that play, the Bengals have done a pretty good job of containing him, holding him in, not letting him scramble all around. They did get, I forget how many sacks, didn't they get like 4 or 5 sacks on him last year? So they had a pretty good game against him, and then they didn't play him in the playoffs. That being said, I didn't quite see that same explosiveness breakaway. He got caught from behind a couple times by defensive ends and bigger guys where normally you would expect him to just run away from those guys almost like they're walking. But he didn't do that. We'll see. I mean, hopefully, I don't want to see him do that to the Bengals. I hope he continues to look slow, but I'm not going to say Lamar lost a step. I don't know if he was just being more hesitant to run or what. We'll see through the course of the season if it's the same Lamar that we saw in years past. Part of the reason Lamar may feel like he doesn't need to do that kind of stuff is he has a new weapon in the offense in number 4, Zay Flowers, the rookie out of Boston College. Now, when you watch the games, you'll see players like Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase or even somebody like Tony Pollard, who, when you see them on tape, they just pop off the screen with their athleticism, explosiveness, speed, that they just look like they play at a different speed than all the other players on the field. That's what Zay Flowers look like. He's not that big. He's only about 5'8" or 5'9" and maybe 165, 170 pounds. He's a smaller guy, but he's got the quickness, the speed. He's going to be one that they're going to have to keep an eye on. He had about 9 catches in his first game as a rookie. So the Ravens were really trying to get him involved. He also had a bunch of runs. So they would do like end around. They would just hand the ball off to him. And he had a number of runs. He was touching the ball. He was a big part of their offense. He was the focus of their offense. That's probably trying to take some of the stress off of Lamar Jackson and say, give the ball to this rookie, let him run around and be electric, and you preserve your legs and just stay back there and throw and run the offense. Now, some of the other things that jumped out on tape about Zay Flowers was he's one of these guys that never puts his mouthpiece and his mouth guard into his mouth. I don't understand why these guys run around with their mouth guard out. So Zay Flowers, mouth guard, even when he was like running with the football, you would think, okay, I'm going to get the ball in a handoff. That's what the point of the mouth guard is, to protect your mouth and your face and your teeth from not getting broken and concussions and all kinds of stuff. So if you're not going to put it in, why even have it on your face mask? I would say just take it off. It's just being a distraction, getting in the way, flopping all around in your face. And that was one of the reasons I really didn't like Jalen Ramsey, because he was one of those guys who always had his mouth guard out because he was always talking trash to guys. That's why AJ Green had to body slam him. He should have just put his mouth guard in and shut up. But I remember Carl Lawson, who was the defensive end, he played with no mouth guard, and then he got his 2 front teeth knocked out. That's what rookies do. Carl Lawson, when he was a rookie, got his 2 front teeth knocked out because he played with no mouth guard. That's the kind of thing that rookies do until they get their teeth knocked out, and then they put the mouth guard in. Okay, what other superficial things about Zay Flowers can I bring up now? Well, also, his socks. Now, I hate to be a stickler, but there is a uniform code in the NFL, and you must have socks that come all the way up to your knees. This isn't college where we can have guys running around with their bare legs and their calf muscles showing off. No, you have to have full-length socks in the NFL, and they have to be a certain color. For some reason, Zay Flowers was out there in the second quarter with no socks on. He was just running around with his legs exposed, and then it's like a drive later, he had socks on again. So he must have gotten warned by the league, like, hey, you're the only guy out here on the field with no socks on. You look ridiculous. Put some socks on. But socks and mouth guard and hairstyle and all the other stuff aside, he is an extremely dangerous, versatile weapon. He's not that big, but he is used in a lot of different ways, and he's going to be hard for the Bengals to match up to, because I don't know if guys like Mike Hilton or some of the other defensive backs, I know we got a lot of team speed, so it's going to be interesting to see how well they're able to cover him all the way over all across the field. The Ravens also picked up Odell Beckham Jr. in the offseason. They paid him $15 million, which seems like a lot for a guy who had multiple ACL injuries. The last time Odell Beckham Jr. was playing in the league was in the Super Bowl against the Bengals, and he was talking stuff about how if he didn't get hurt, he would have been the Super Bowl MVP, and he was about to have 250 yards on Mike Hilton guard him out of the slot, and Mike Hilton can't guard him, and blah, blah, blah. So there's going to be some interest from the Bengals to make sure that he doesn't go off on them like he said he was going to. But the Ravens' offense in general, it's very similar to the Bengals, to my amateur eye. It looks similar. The biggest difference is the Ravens have a fullback on their team, which it's Patrick Ricard is their fullback. He's about 300 pounds, but he can move. So he's like a small offensive lineman who can move and run a little bit and catch a little bit. The Bengals don't have that type of a guy on their roster at all. They've used tight ends in place of a fullback position, but they don't have a true fullback. Their tight ends are kind of like taller. I mean, they're thick, but this is on a different level of thickness. These fullbacks are built kind of like a fire hydrant. And we could have used some fire hydrants out there last week, but again, let's move on. We're not thinking about that. But sometimes you just need those big, stocky fullback guys. Look at the 49ers. They got Kyle Juszczyk. Some teams know how to use a fullback. You don't need a lot of them, just one or two. But Zach Taylor seems like philosophically opposed to the position. But I mean, a lot of teams in the league don't use fullbacks. We don't see fullbacks get drafted into the league anymore, so it's kind of a dying position. And all these offenses are basically the same. They just have different players playing different positions. It's a copycat league, and if everybody's thinking, oh, well, nobody else is using a fullback, why would I use a fullback if nobody else is? If I'm using a fullback, maybe I'm doing it wrong. So I don't know. I think there is a time and a place for every situation, and the Ravens have used Patrick Ricard to great effect over the years, so that's one to watch. Ricard is number 42 for the Ravens. Bengals should be able to get some pass rush, but I expect it to be more of that same bend but don't break, keep everything in front of the Bengals, don't lose contain and give up the big play. I think the Bengals have the athletes in the defensive secondary. Now they got DJ Turner, Cheeto, Mike Hilton, Nick Scott, Dax Hill, and Cam Taylor-Britt. They played some dime last week with Logan Wilson as the only linebacker. So 6 defensive backs is a dime coverage. So they can match up with any team, they can run anywhere. So if the Ravens want to get into a track meet with the Bengals, I think they can cover them well on the defensive side. In the special teams game, everybody should know about the Ravens kicker, Justin Tucker, number 9. He's inarguably the best kicker in the NFL and has been for a number of years now. He's got the strongest leg. He's got the record in the NFL for the longest kick ever. If you remember the kick in Detroit, off the upright and in, unbelievable kick. But he's been doing it for a long time. Accuracy, he always paints it right down the middle. The only kicker that maybe is rivaling him these days in terms of accuracy from a long distance is our own kicker, Evan McPherson. Evan, I know, has looked up to Justin Tucker as kind of a role model and an idol of his as a place kicker, so it's always good to see these two kickers going head-to-head. The Ravens punter, number 11, Jordan Stout, he was a 4th-round draft pick, so that's pretty high in the draft to select a punter. In the first game against the Texans, he had 5 punts for an average of 49.8 yards gross and a net of 45 yards total. That was like 10 yards average longer than what Brad Robbins punted. Granted, Brad Robbins last week punted in the rain, but he was getting about 35 yards net on his punts between his punt distance and the returns. We need to make up the difference against the Ravens in the punting game there and see a better performance out of Brad this week. And some of the interviews that came out from the locker room, Brad Robbins was very contrite and mature in the way that he knew that he had to do a better job. He didn't make any excuses. He said, hey, the weather is something we're going to have to handle in the AFC North. And he mentioned how he played at Michigan for 6 years, so he is no stranger to the elements. He just has to do a better job. In terms of the return game, Devin Duvernay is a receiver for the Ravens, but also a return man, and he is very dangerous. He's got a number of long returns for touchdowns in the last couple of years. He is one to keep an eye on the return game. All right, now we have to move to the Ravens defense against the Bengals offense. This is the part that I'm a little bit scared about. When I put on the film, C.J. Stroud for the Texans was running for his life all game last week. Every single time he dropped back, there was guys running at him in all directions. And I could just imagine Joe Burrow back there with a strained calf. Oh man, the Bengals are going to have to figure out their protection because against the Browns, and granted, they did have Myles Garrett, they did have Zadarius Smith, but Joe Burrow got hit 10 times. He got hit way too much, and the amount of time that he had to throw was among the lowest in the league. It was like something like 1.9 seconds average time until he got hit on his dropbacks. And he was in shotgun. If he's got less than 2 seconds to throw the ball, that's not very much time. Even though Joe Burrow didn't take a lot of sacks, he's taking too many hits, as we have seen him do throughout the years. We don't want to see Andrew Luck. We've said that many times. Andrew Luck had to retire early because he took too many hits. We don't want the same thing to happen to Joe Burrow because he's a sitting duck back there. Joe Burrow needs to be able to throw the ball quickly, get it out of his hands before he takes too many big hits. Now, the Ravens up front don't have those kind of Myles Garrett type of studs, but they do have number 24, Jadeveon Clowney, who was playing for the Browns last year as the opposite of Myles Garrett. This time he's on the Ravens. So he's very familiar with the Bengals. And they also have a couple of good defensive ends, Odafe Owe and David Ojabo, number 99 and number 90, respectively. Those are some elite pass rush prospects coming out of the draft. For the Ravens, it doesn't really start with their defensive line. They have a good defensive line, but the heart of the defense is number 0, Roquan Smith. He is their all-pro, elite, freak linebacker. He's all over the field. He's not quite as big as Myles Garrett, but he's just as disruptive as a defensive player, just as dominant. There's really no way to stop him. You can only get in the way temporarily. He was all over the field against the Texans. I felt bad for C.J. Stroud. Roquan Smith was yelling, stay in college, at him. So he was just being brutal. But they've got Roquan Smith as the Mike inside linebacker. And then they also have number 6, Patrick Queen, who is just as good an athlete, if not better. And he is scary off the blitz. So their 2 inside linebackers are 2 of the best in the game. Definitely 2 of the most athletic linebackers in the NFL. These guys, if they send these linebackers on a blitz at Joe Burrow, I'm just having nightmares right now. Like, oh God, we really need Joe Mixon and Travion Williams. Maybe we'll have multiple guys back there standing in front of Joe Burrow blocking for these guys, because the Ravens linebackers are all over the place. And then behind them, they've got number 14, strong safety Kyle Hamilton. He's like 6'4", 225 out of Notre Dame. I think he was their first round draft pick, but a big, ranging, strong safety. Not necessarily the absolute fastest top end speed guy, but he's kind of more like a hybrid linebacker safety type guy. So he's definitely able to make a lot of big hits, break up a lot of passes over the middle. I would expect the Bengals to continue to try to press the perimeter of the field like they did against the Browns. All the pass plays that the Bengals tried against the Browns were towards the sideline. Outs, deep outs, outside fades. Everything was toward the sideline, away from the middle of the field. Part of that is probably because they figured if Joe Burrow threw anything over the middle, it would get intercepted because he didn't have a grip on the ball. But I think in this situation, when the inside of the Ravens defense is so strong, the Bengals are going to try to press the outside on the perimeter, give it to Jamar Chase way on the outside and let him make something happen. But we'll see what happens Sunday, 1 o'clock, when the pigskin flies, as they say. It's just going to be nice to have some other game to talk about and to think about. Okay, real quick, let's run through the week 2 game picks. I picked the Eagles over the Vikings. That game is already over, but the Eagles ended up pulling it out. I picked Packers, Bills, Bengals, Lions, Chargers, Bucks, Jags, Colts, 49ers, Giants, Cowboys, Commanders, Dolphins, Panthers, and Browns. Last week, I was 8 for 8 in my picks, 50%. We'll see how I do this week. This week, I picked more away teams. So last week, I only picked 4 away teams. This week, I picked 8 away teams. So I'm going more of a balance. We'll see how this works out this time. I feel like I've got a little bit better idea of which teams are good, which teams are bad, but you never know. We'll see. And we'll see what happens in the game. It's going to be 1 o'clock Sunday on CBS. The announced crew this week is going to be Andrew Catalon, Tiki Barber, and Matt Ryan. Off the field, in the announce booth, we'll see how Matt Ryan is at calling it games. I didn't check out Matt Ryan's previous game. Maybe I'll have to go back and watch whatever game he announced week 1 to see if he's any good. But that'll be interesting to see how Matt Ryan is calling a Bengals game. Again, I want to thank you for listening. Just a reminder, I'm not affiliated with the Bengals, not sponsored by anything. I don't ask you for anything as a listener. Just subscribe, share it with a friend if you think somebody will like it. And when we come back next episode, we're going to do the week 2 recap with the Ravens and Bengals. All the interesting things that happened in the game. Hopefully, we'll be talking about a win on the next episode. So until then, I'm going to leave you with a hoo-day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.